welcome to Webcology and WMR.fm. It's the 15th of December, 2022. It's like 10 days before Christmas. Probably too late to make a lot of changes to your Christmas marketing campaigns. And so that's over, but it is time to think about moving into the new year, planning new year budgets, and dealing with all things about renewal, but you can't. Because, well, I don't know about you, David. You know, for the audiences, just for the listening audience, Dave is kind of lucky as his career is moving past the trench life of SEO and into the finer areas of machine learning. So much of this is his damn fault. Because SEOs aren't getting a Christmas this year. It's not Dave's damn fault. It's just Dave Zilk's damn fault. And I gotta hold him accountable later. We're not getting a Christmas this year because there are a bunch of algorithm updates, including the one that was released but like what, 2 days ago today, a major link spam update. There's a helpful update from last week, and rumors of a core update to hit next week. Merry Christmas, Bob Cratchit. You're not going home, and you can't have any coal for the fire. Well, you can have coal in your stocking, but you can't use it in the fire. Global warming and stuff. And yeah, Scroogled. You are so Scroogled.
I won't let ML take the blame on the core update. The other two, okay. they might be, ML might be at least in the mix. You know what? And then having said that, I'm like, depending, unless that core update is to be able to pull in different machine learning models and algorithms, in which case I guess ML's kind of like, but at least in my mind, and I might actually be wrong, right? I mean, I'd say like more often than not, I probably am. It's just like how more often, like when we're trying to predict the future or guess at what's going on, sort of within the algorithm. Algorithms, at play on Google. But I think of core updates as generally, and this is where I may be totally wrong, I think of them generally as man-made, right? Or I guess better said, person-made. Sort of constructs where they might be doing it to plug in a machine learning algorithm or something, but that a human is actually sat down and sort of programmed out, how this is all going to work and the network architecture and all of that sort of stuff. But looking at the way that machines, like that might be an absolutely ignorant thing for me to believe right at this point, that it's not actually in part, that part of this could not have been built by a machine. I do not believe, looking at the coding capabilities of ML models, I don't believe that we're at that stage yet, but Google does some fantastic things.
What I think the core updates are about are binding many of the algorithm updates together. These right. Functions have now been introduced sporadically. Google introduces like 2 or 3 tweaks to its algorithm every day, probably more, and some fairly significant tweaks, changes, or adjustments to the algorithm as its own feedback, much of which is machine learning driven, dictates. Now, there's nothing wrong with it being machine learning driven. I mean, the scale and the scope is astronomical. It's beyond human comprehension. Literally, it's the scale of Google is Douglas Adams' galaxy big. Big is too small a word to describe how big it is. And so machine learning is quite important, and quite a useful tool. I mean, like, and I believe that Google search results are, believe it or not, gradually improving, but the needs of Google users are changing, and so the Google results themselves are changing, how they're being fed and calculated and all that sort of stuff. But on par, they're pretty good, but they are challenged by another machine learning model. I mean, like now that people have been playing with the great chatbot Chat GPT, its utility as a question answerer is phenomenal. If there's a Google killer out there, it might be a chatbot.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you bring that up, because I'd mentioned, I think it was last week, might have been the week before. It's kind of a Blur's Day kind of day here right now, but I'd mentioned the Chrome extension that you could use, and you just sign up for Chat GPT's API and that it'd work. What was interesting, because I just, in sort of my processes of education, had entered in, and folks who can play along at home, if you just go over to Chat GPT, I had just seen it in my browser. I happened to be on Google putting in PyTorch dropout, just anyway, for a variety of different reasons. Anyway, but I had Chat GPT on the right-hand side. Like, I won't bother getting into why. But all of a sudden it gave, like, Chat GPT gave a nice description, but then actually started writing the code for me. And in context of that code, going A equal, like, actually defining what the different parts of the code were and what it was doing, and then put in some more code below that. So
was it trying to show off?
It was trying, like, I'd never seen one quite like that. Like a Chat GPT response quite like that. I did know it had done code, but to be able to explain code back to me that well was very, very impressive. So going back to sort of a previous point in our conversation, I don't know that we're that far away from the core, like from updates being written, by a machine at that point. But just that I found it interesting, and then you brought up the Chat GPT, and then I thought, okay, well, I need to mention this interesting sort of extension, and it does make it a additional tool in your arsenal potentially if you're trying to educate yourself on, I assume, any topic, but certainly coding. It does a good job.
Well, the point I'm trying to get to is you can't core update. Google's improving its capacities. It's improving its ability to understand language, understand what objects and people's writing means. Often it was left to conjecture and interpretation, but Google's getting pretty good at that conjecture and interpretation. And I think for that, it's producing better results. And just as honestly, I think Google and possibly Apple and possibly Amazon have brought us to a threshold where their artificial intelligence, their machine learning apparatus is so strong that with just a little bit more development, I think we may well be on the threshold of a completely different internet as we understand it. Like you were saying, Chat GPT not only filled in blanks for you, but actually was doing programming for you.
Yeah.
I'm only half bitten. That's terrifyingly phenomenal. And that was just you. Were you actually trying to accomplish something, or were you just sort of messing around and seeing what could be accomplished?
No, that was just because I had this extension. I was actually just on Google doing a Google search. But Chat GPT fills in on the right-hand side, where the ads used to be or where the knowledge panel would be now. I just have, like, the extension just has Chat GPT fill in there, the answer. But I'd never seen anything like that. Usually it fills in with like a little Wikipedia, like an extended Wikipedia version, different, but like same sort of idea, like just sort of like a short couple paragraph. But this basically filled, like, it would have been the length, sort of knowledge panel width, and the length of probably the top 7. Like, it was this long text with 2 segments of coding into it, very in-depth descriptions of what that code was doing. Now, at the same time, and I didn't run and test, I did put it past a couple of my peers who did seem impressed with the code and description it had come up with as well. But would I just trust that to put it to the wild and go, yeah, this code's good to ship? No.
No, but would you post it to GitHub?
But yeah, well, exactly. And that's where you hit sort of those questions. Or would I, sites that might suffer from something like this, would I bother going to Stack Exchange again? Right? Like, is that like those kinds of sites I could see getting damaged? Now, then you hit the circular loop and go, but if you don't go to Stack Exchange, what trains the algorithm? Like, so you hit that sort of like problem, right? And we've talked about that previously on our show, right? Where if publishers get replaced with bots and algorithms, then what do those algorithms train on? Because they can only train on what is known. It's why people will always be necessary in this equation. Is people will basically present novel solutions, right? Like we'll come up with something that a machine can't because we aren't trained on the machine, right? Like we can come up with something different. Whereas all GPT chat or GPT-3 or 4, whichever version, is we're talking about here, whatever it will produce will only be based on what it has seen before that a human being has produced. So if all of a sudden we start messing up with that sort of like people are publishing stuff, novel ideas, then all of a sudden the machines aren't training on novel concepts or diminishing numbers of novel concepts, novel pages. And then all of a sudden the machines get worse. And so that's sort of the scenario that will sort of hit here. But in the short term, I do wonder, like if I've got solutions like that coming up, if I'm a publisher like Stack Exchange, for example, or I'm Stack Overflow, or any Q&A type sites, right? Like, am I going to get the click? Well, often not. Wikipedia could actually get a hit from this if everybody starts using this extension, because it's like Wikipedia's answer, but a little more thorough. Like at least their knowledge graph answer, but a little more thorough. Anyway.
Okay, so basically what I've heard you say is there's no leverage here for SEOs to threaten Google with a Google killing replacement thing, and Google's still going to ruin our Christmas, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. And even ChatGPT, for all of its power and glory, can't help. That's what you just told me, really.
Yeah, that's a pretty decent summary. Another interesting thing for us to consider, though, like ChatGPT is built on the bones of GPT-3. Well, DaVinci 003 is the version. Anyway, it's built on that. It'll be built on 4 when 4 comes out, which is rumored to be within the next couple months. So it'll evolve. But something that's interesting to remember is that's not Google, right? Like that's actually built by OpenAI. They're more closely aligned, I think, with Microsoft than Google, right? Like they're not a Googly thing. Google has its own things going on their own, right? And I'm sure most of that is just internal use. So everything we're seeing, clearly Google has an equivalent, like because I'm sure they have many developers working on the exact same thing that they just feel isn't quite ready for prime time. But if I thought they would feel comfortable just putting that in there, like filling up their replacing Wikipedia as the knowledge graph on the right, or the answer in some cases for like a named entity or something, if they could replace that with their own, once they hit that confidence level that they view themselves as more legitimate an answer than Wikipedia, or some other source. It's usually Wikipedia, as you know, they'll replace it. So yes, we're seeing problems with GPT-3 or GPT chat. Google will have an equivalent. At some point, Google will just replace it. And then you're going to see a lot of publishers suffer, right, in that case, because all of a sudden, like Wikipedia will all of a sudden be losing a bunch of its real estate and sites like that. This is my prediction. I don't know this to be true, but that's my guess of what we got. Just speaking of crappy holidays. So anyway.
Okay, so there's not a lot that you can do about the 3 updates in a row. Again, we don't know if there's a core update coming. There's rumors of a core update coming. But I would bet Barry will be reporting on a core update as of Monday or Tuesday. Nothing we can do about any of this except ride it out. Helpful is very probably about a craptastic or good content. So there's stuff you can do there but you won't see an effect for a couple of months, as Google has said. Similarly, a link spam update. I mean, what do you do about a link spam update? If you have acquired a bunch of links through nefarious means, you're probably going to get punished. Self disavowing may or may not help. Probably, probably should, because you got the crappy links. But it's, that's disavow is suddenly this big black box that Google itself is saying we're not sure about ourselves. So yeah, algorithm updates are coming. I think working on content and making your page as accessible and fast as possible are your best bets to spend your Christmas holidays. But there's a good chance your clients are going to be riding you hard during the holidays.
Yep.
As they do.
So enjoy.
Okay, so here's your strategy. Okay, and Google's actually, as Google taketh away, Google giveth as well, because Google's given a really cool little infographic on how different parts of the search engine results page is using its official, giving official names and everything for different parts of the search results page, and you can explain to your clients who are riding you fairly hard this Christmas, because there's been a whole bunch of updates and their results are fluctuating. You can tell them that you're working on schema so that the rich snippets will appear, and just point to this chart and say, "See, I told you so," or something to that effect. That's how I would use it.
Yeah. I mean, I love this thing, right? But I love it basically in the same way, like you look at it. I'm sure you've looked at it. I've looked at it, right? And you know all these things. It is nice to have them all in one spot, but it is another one of those documents that's useful exactly as you're talking about it, where it's just like, it's a better explanation than I could have put together given weeks. To just sort of send to a client, go, this is what we're working on, like before, especially when it's before it hits, or like when you're proposing a new strategy and just going, see this thing, like that's the thing that we're working on right now. And it even has named anchors, right? So you can go like image, right? Like this is that part. This is what this part of schema that we're working on helps, or and sending it to developers. So I think they did a really, really big win with this one. I really like it. It's such a simple thing. Well, and so many people have tried to do it before, but I think they did a really, really good job.
The other important thing, and something I'm really hoping Google starts to concentrate on moving into 2023, is standardization of language and terms. One of the problems that's plagued our industry from the get-go, from the very first day, is we've been making this up as we go along, mostly. And there's a good deal of history and precedent to build stuff on, but there's still the impulse, until Google put its foot down, like 2, maybe 3 years ago, there was still the impulse to name updates over something frivolous or topical, rather than something, easily identifiable, such as the pending December 2022 core update. So if Google would standardize how it refers to things and how it wants us to refer to things, I think that'd be really useful moving forward. And this infographic is actually a big step forward doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is handy. Although, you know what, admit it, Jim, there's party that misses the more fun game of naming updates that used to be.
Cool. Absolutely, there was a great deal of fun. It was I understand why the Florida update was called Florida. It really was screwy and upside down, and came at just the worst. It did the worst possible thing at the worst possible time. I understand why they named it that. They named him after hurricanes at one time. Brett Tabke used to name updates based on where PubCon was going to be next. That's his own, I think, his way of getting a quick plug for his
Yeah.
next location.
Right. Not bad.
So, standardization is going to be really helpful. So we can refer back to that time in, February of 2016 when we all agree that this thing happened. That may move, I don't know, some sense of professionalism forward. I hope so anyway. And clear up a lot of the silly mysticism that sometimes is present around the industry. Okay, so not to try to pile the letters on here, but Google's done more E and is really, really happy to tell you about anything, really, because that's what E does to you. Google's added
well done on that one, by the way, Jim. That was pretty well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm actually, somehow I stole that off Barry Schwartz, but I changed it substantially. So Google's added an extra E to its EAT mantra, its quality raters guide, things to look out for, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Experience is the second E. So expertise and experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. This is what Google quality raters are to be looking for when judging how Google judges content. So this is how you should be creating content. What does that mean is the great question. How to say this? Expertise counts a lot. That doesn't mean you have to have a PhD level knowledge of any given subject. Although I bet you the content from a PhD level writer would be most interesting to read. It may or may not rank well with Google because the average Google user doesn't read PhD level content. But somebody with experience of what they're writing will tend to produce stronger, better content, more helpful content, because the person knows what they're talking about. How do you interpret expertise as part of EAT?
I find this interesting, mainly because they'd actually alluded to it in previous versions of the update, and I think they're just offering clarification. I think like for their raters in how to view things. So I don't think we're actually seeing any change on the part of Google in what they're trying to have done. I think they probably are just trying to solve an internal problem with what they want done being misunderstood. And what leads me to say this is they used as an example in previous guidelines, taking a case where, and I think we've actually sort of touched on it on this show, where a high expertise itself, which is sort of always been in the E of EAT before the experience one got brought in, where they defined expertise as including expertise sort of with a specific concept within a problem. So if you have a case where somebody is seeking advice on how to deal with sort of life and grieving, etc., and this is sort of their example of living with somebody with terminal cancer, was right from their guidelines, and going, the expertise is not somebody with like 5 doctorates and 20 years of experience in medicine necessarily, even though they're an expert, and that's probably who you'd go to for the treatments. Indeed. The expertise, or the expertise as they were defining it at the time, had more to do with, I've been in that scenario, right? Like I too have worked through this. I've had a partner with that, in that I've been through it. So it's experience, not expertise. And you look and go, yeah, if I want like an amazing recipe for a cheesecake, to go on a lighter note, do I want to go to somebody who's studied like diets and nutrition and health for like 10 years? On paper, they know a lot about food and nutrition. nope, I'd rather learn from like a home cook who makes great cheesecake, right? Like, so I think that's where we get into defining that difference between experience and expertise. But they listed it in the examples previously, but I think obviously their raters just needed a little like, nope, you can measure these as two different things. And they might even way off where when one grows, the other one has to shrink because you're going to have one or the other, not both.
Like I was mentioning earlier, standardization is really important in trying to professionalize our industry, and mnemonics are important too. And eat was a great mnemonic. Like you could easily remember. Now, eat is a little bit harder, so I think they need to add another element, the element of bestiness. So if you have a best or better page than the next page, you'll rank better, right? Like, duh. So eBeat, that makes so much more sense, don't you think? And
Let's go with it.
Yeah, and I think if anyone, Lily Ray can popularize this, and should. So expertise, betterness, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, and you got a great page. That's what I figure. Okay, so just in case someone's trying to sell you something, or in case you yourself are looking for it, there is no helpful content score. There's no measure. There's no...
Get ready, Ohio. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, is coming to the Buckeye State. And to kick things off, you can get started with $100 in free bets as an early sign-on bonus. Plus, when you sign up today with promo code Ohio, you'll be all set for when FanDuel goes live in Ohio. Then you can bet on all your favorite teams and all your favorite sports with $100 in free bets. Just download FanDuel's top-rated sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in Ohio. Bonus issued in non-withdrawable free bets that expire 7 days after FanDuel accepts its first real money sports wager in Ohio. 1/1/23. Unique user identity verification required. Offer ends on the go live date. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Ohio, this is your chance to get in on the action. Join today with promo code Ohio.
Metric. There's no dial. You can turn up to 10 or 11 to be even more helpful than the next guy. There's none of that stuff exists. Just write helpful content.
Yeah.
You know why Google had to say that? Because people are selling helpful score metrics. Like, for real. People are out there now trying to, somehow measure helpfulness.
Yeah, and it's a funny one, right? Like, because not a funny one. Like, I understand why Google had to say this, and I've always sort of viewed it as and the way they worded it made me think it's probably kind of ish, right? Although oversimplified. I've always just sort of thought of it as a dimmer switch more than a light switch, right? It's not like, oh, you went from useless to useful, right? Like click and now it's on, right? Like clearly we have like in a specific area, your helpfulness, like multiple, like a wall of dimmer switches, right? Where like, you're deemed as more helpful in different stuff. That's how I sort of visualize this anyway. But for them to go out and say there's no score, you know what? I'll just call it is fundamentally wrong, right? Like it has to be fundamentally wrong. And the way we know that is simply that we're dealing with an algorithm. Algorithm is numbers. So if you're going to if you're going to say something is helpful, it is or it isn't. And I mean, like, it can be in grades of helpfulness. Like, I've asked people questions for directions, and it's been like, it's about a kilometer down there, or a mile for, or I guess, like 0.6 miles. But like, it's just down there, like, and then like take right in a bit, right? Like, okay, that's helpful, a low level of helpfulness, but it's helpful, which would work its way up to, let me print you off a map. Why didn't you bring your phone, right? Like, there's scales of helpfulness here. Mm-hmm. So. But at the end of the day, if it's in an algorithm, it has to be something that you can pull down into a number. It just does. Like, so for them to say there isn't a score, I think is a bit misleading. Like I get where they're going with it, but I think it's a bit misleading because actually it does have to, by necessity, be something they can turn into a number. Otherwise, they shouldn't have something called a helpful content update, because clearly helpfulness isn't measured. So if helpfulness is measured to be able to do an update on it, then it has to be reducible to maybe not a number, but a series of numbers that cascades, sort of through an algorithm. So I think it was a bit misleading on their part, but I get what they're going for on that one. But that may be why, to me, visualizing it as like a series of dimmer switches is a little better. It's probably a bunch of numbers. It's not a score, and it's so complex you'll never reduce it down to like a green bar, sort of thing. So they might be kind of right, but I think it was still a bit misleading. But at the same time, if they told us it is a score, we know what we do with that as SEOs, Jim. We do remember the green bar. So we'll go, oh, okay, and then the monetization will continue. So
don't forget, they gave us the green bar to look at. Now they're sort of dangling the concept in front of us, saying there isn't a finite number that we can define and give to you. I think you're probably closer. You're closer when you say it's a series of dimmer switches. You can, one or more could be turned at any given time to change the texture of the lighting in the room, or the veracity of how, or the how Google feels about the usefulness or helpfulness of said content or said page. But I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's a number of things put together that then get, reamed through some magic box, the algorithm, and something comes out the other side. And I think it's a moving target, all the time moving target too.
Oh, always, yeah. Yeah, but that's to be said of everything. And I don't even think Google knows where the target is, right? Like they've got so much ML built in there and like so many things going on all the time that I don't think there's any one or even like grouping of people at Google that could get together and tell you what's going to be coming a month from now, or like what a specific search result will look like a month from now.
What they can tell you is some things that are and some things that are not in their list of ingredients of whatever makes up the cake mix that makes the algorithm. One of the things that is not in there, and they've had to reiterate it again and again and again, is stuff like time on site. It is in there. It's not explicitly part of the ranking algorithms, and no user behavior metrics are explicitly part of the ranking algorithms, although they may affect different things that affect the algorithms themselves. The actual metric, time on page, is not a ranking factor, just like the actual metric, bounce rate, is not a ranking factor, but it's probably part of something that is.
Right. Yeah, if we go back, now this is going back a few years, and things change over a few years, things change over a few hours in SEO, but I think this one will still hold true. And I remember John Mueller was talking about user signals a while back, and what he said makes a lot of sense in how Google uses them. And according to John at the time, and I can't remember specifically what year it was, I want to say like 2019-ish though, like it was just a few years ago. Basically said that they use signals like that not to grade whether your site is doing well, but they would look at a query and go, we would expect a satisfied user to respond like this on for that specific query, be it they should have a high bounce rate, they should click through, see something, see the answer, and then click back. Nothing wrong with that. There's queries when I'm satisfied, there's many queries that my click and then like being back like 3 minutes later is fantastic with no other page views, right? Like there's many queries that's exactly what I should. YouTube videos, right? Like that's a great example.
Accomplish the goal.
Exactly. It did what it was supposed to do. So according to John, what they do is they look at that, figure out what they would expect, like basically look and go, what should we expect? And then if they start seeing pages on there that don't fulfill that need, they don't punish those pages. And that does make sense because it's not those pages' fault. It's Google not surfacing what they want. So rather than looking, going, oh, we need to devalue those pages, which doesn't help them in the big picture. They look at that and go, okay, among all these common times we see this problem, this is what's happening. So let's take a look at our algorithm. And so adjust the entire algorithm to sort of reduce the weighting being given to pages that don't fulfill and increase the ones that do provide the experience that they would expect from the users. So, and I find it funny because John was putting that as like we don't grade sites. And I, of course, go, yeah, but it's going to feel like a penalty. Like when the algorithm changes and you're punished, it's going to feel like a penalty, even though it wasn't me. So you could be penalized by it. But at the same time, it's actually the algorithm. It's Google doing what we all do. We look at our site metrics, go, oh, people aren't doing what they should be doing. They're not satisfied. And we try and fix that, or at least we should be. So that's basically what they're doing, and it makes sense to me.
And incidentally, that's how you should be using, not you personally, Dave, but that's how you listeners, webmasters should be using time on site and metrics like that. They don't worry about how they affect Google. Honestly, don't worry about if people going to the pages that you're responsible for, that you built, are doing what you expected them to do when they're there. Like, if that's a long form article, it would take 3 minutes to 8 minutes to read or whatever, and people are like jumping out after 2 minutes, you got a problem with the article.
Right. The
traffic's going there. It's just not doing what you wanted it to do when it was there. And that's how you can use metrics like that. But using them as something to, unless it's an explicit goal of your clients, I really wouldn't report stuff like that back to them, because why bother? They don't really need to know. Now, that's something that's not a ranking factor. Here's something Gary Ice pointed out that is specifically could be a deranking factor. This will get you out of the index if you do it long enough. And that's reporting back a 500 or a 503 error. Now, status codes are way important. People should know their status codes. 500 or 503 is server errors. And for Google, the server error is a really big problem, especially with larger e-com sites, because it takes so much energy just to go through e-com sites with, the accordion nature of a headless site. Any 500 error, especially for a prolonged period of time, and Google's just going to stop bothering trying to get to that website, trying to deal with that server. And I noticed something really, really interesting on crawl budget. I had a client, large website, fairly, I have to assume they have a fairly large crawl budget, because it's a lot to crawl. But their server was hiccuping for a couple of days. Server error, like Google detected the server didn't respond to ping requests or to download requests as frequently as it wanted to, which I believe is 99% of requests need to be responded to, or Google's going to, 98% of requests need to be responded to, or Google's going to flag an error. If that happens, you have a 90-day limitation on your crawl budget. When that 90-day passes, that limit might be revoked, might be lifted, and your crawl budget will expand. But be aware of that. If you serve up 500s, Google's going to start ratcheting back the attention it gives you to a point where it's just not going to give you any attention at all, and you will literally fall out of the index.
Now, it's something I think worth noting, because great point, or a great thing to mention for folks. I think one caveat that I think is worth mentioning before people run off to search and wherever and panic is,
Indeed.
like, if you have hundreds of thousands of pages, even thousands, heck, even hundreds of pages. And Google's flagging like a 500 on one, you're probably okay.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
not a
don't
problem.
panic just because you have one. But yeah, I was like, which isn't what you were talking about. But I would just, like to mention just in case people, because I could see somebody going, oh, but I've got one.
Well, that indicates you've got a problem going. There's a problem there somewhere, but it's not, that won't knock you out of the index. This has to happen over a prolonged period of time.
Yeah.
And Google's got to like hit timeouts or server downages fairly frequently when it's trying to extract information about your pages. So one or two of them ain't going to get you knocked out. But if you are serving up server errors, that indicates there's possibly a problem with your server, and you might want to either talk to your admin or your ISP.
You know what? And that's a really good point. Anytime you see stuff like that, why?
Yeah.
Like,
is this
and that's
a
always a
cascading
good
issue?
question. Yeah.
Okay, so this is cool. Google is I really wish that this existed, like, I don't know, 3 months ago, when it would have been more useful for this Christmas. Expandable product search results. Google is serving up search results that have like little information boxes that will open and accordion out on the search result page to give you even more information from that site. Saves space and makes specific product results even more useful to the user. And I think that's really cool because it'll move people from search results to product purchase that one step faster.
Yeah, these updates I find really, really interesting for a variety of reasons. Obviously, I agree with you. I think it's like, as a user, like as a human being, like, I love it, right? Like, I mean, I think it's handy, and anything that just sort of like keeps me in one location longer is great. It's not that I'm like, I want to stay on Google, but chances are I'm already there when I'm starting, like, clearly if I'm encountering this. And isn't it nice that I don't need to deal with the whopping 3.5 second lag that's going to be me clicking and then a new site loading, right? And then figuring out how that site, like, how do I work on this site, right? Like, if it's not Amazon, I'm probably gonna have to take a second to reorient myself to like how this product page is sort of like laid out and stuff like that. One of the things that I find more interesting as a marketer to this is, well, okay, there's a few things, but one of them that captures me that I almost would miss is, now my user journey is different, right? Like, what the user is encountering when they're jumping in is absolutely different. So all of a sudden, when I have bounce rates, for example, or cart abandonments, it means a different thing. What it means, I don't, like, we're just talking about this now, and it's like just happened, right? I haven't evaluated that, but it is something that we need to be thinking about and go, oh, okay, the context with which users from Google organic are entering in at is different. How does that change our metrics? Because it will change them, because their entire experience coming in. If all of a sudden we see our bounce rate is down, or our cart abandonment is down, or our bounce rate is down, that's not necessarily good or bad, but we have to put that in context. We might think of it as good, but it's not good. It's just that they understood more about what's about to happen to them and then jumped in to make their buying. But it's because they've already decided on everything else. So the fact that their abandonment is lower is actually just because they know more, or their bounce rate is lower too, is just because they already know all the information before they get there. So once they get there, they're there to do the final piece. Is that good? Is that bad? I won't judge that. That'll depend on what an individual is doing and what their metrics tell them. But the metrics are about to change, and you need to understand that what might look good might not be good, and what might look bad might not be bad. It's just that the entire environment is different now. But as a user, it's good. So fundamentally, if you have a good provider offering good service on well-reviewed products, it's probably going to be a win.
Well, indeed. And something you to Dave's point, check your transaction and conversion metrics, assuming you've set up Google Analytics to track conversions. if you're seeing a greater number of conversions, but you got some weird numbers on bounce rate, or weird numbers on people actually going into your cart. They're not getting into your cart, but you're still getting conversions, or they're entering your cart from the SERP page specifically, and that's kind of weird. Check out if you've actually made the conversion, if you've seen the transaction, if your revenues are up. And I really think that this do you remember first, like when we were first thinking about designing websites and what we wanted to do and how we wanted to make it easier for people to get from point A to point B to C to D and to get to their purchase point, right? The fewest steps possible was always the holy grail when thinking about about the customer journey and about how to get them to make that purchase. Assuming it's not a terribly complex and thought-provoking purchase, they're not purchasing a new car here. They're purchasing a snow shovel, something rather basic. The fastest means to get them to that purchase point. You're going to make more conversions. I think this is. I'm very hopeful about this.
Yeah, one thing that might not work for all, and it's a it's sort of an important consideration, is it surfaces very, very clearly pricing and review information about different stores, right? Like it's showing, like in the example I'm looking at right now, it's showing 3 with an easy way to get to more of them, like to get to more stores, showing their pricing information and all of that. So it's good to admit, like, if your business is not well rated and if your business isn't offering very competitive pricing on like blue widgets, right? Like, I mean, like on things that are just like, I don't really care where I get this from, it's exactly the same thing. Then we're going to see some, some sort of problems. One of the things I didn't see in it that I think could be really, really interesting, but it's just not in the example. It might exist, but I just haven't looked at it yet, is which ones would be available local. Like the only examples I've seen of it have to do with sort of shipping, right? Like free delivery, stuff like that. I would be interested to know, like, will they start showing on these ones, like available, whatever, 3 miles from you, right? That sort of thing. But we'll see how that goes. But either way, I think this is a lot of fun. Look forward to seeing more of their ideas.
This comes down to schema. Like keep schema as up to date as possible, and merchant listings. Get in with your Google Shopping account. Get very familiar with Google Shopping and with your merchant listings. There's a new tab in Search Console that allows you to see your Google Shopping listings directly, like as they're going to appear. Make use of it. And it's not a lot. Again, it's not. Go for it now. You can make changes in Google search results like minutes later. So do it. Google's drawing information all the time. Not a lot you're going to do for this Christmas, honestly. People think it's shipping and what have you. But next year's coming. Valentine's Day is coming. All those commemorative days are coming, and don't let bad economic news discourage you. In hard economic times, it's the internet has proven to be a very solid base over and over and over again. So
yeah.
Okay, what else do we got? We got a few minutes here. Before we go forward, we should probably make that announcement. That one we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
Shall I, or do you wanna?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so listeners might have noticed over the last couple of years that Dave's interests have shifted, first slightly, then decidedly towards machine learning, and away from the technical and the more hands-on sides of PPC and SEO. He even went as far as getting a job with one of the premier machine learning companies on the planet, Weights and Biases. And in that, Dave's career is taking him to new and different places. And towards the end of January, he's going to be leaving Webcology and starting another series of pod and video casts on the machine learning world. It's been a 16, 17 years that we've been working together, and it's going to be weird. The show will go on, and Dave will go on to another show.
Yeah, although I have a feeling that our regular listeners just might have to tolerate me from time to time. I have a sneaking suspicion.
Well, the world of search is increasingly driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence, and technology is far beyond my positronic brain, my not so positronic brain. But Dave, but he's not out of the room yet. We got several more weeks of him still, but there's no way to say it. I have so loved working with you for the last 16 years, man. Like, it's been the most easy and rewarding partnership.
Indeed. I have to like obviously agree. I remember now, this is going back to 2008, I think, but I remember when you called me up and asked me if I wanted to come on as a co-host of The Alternative, which was our first show together before Webcology here on same network. And it was just like such a thrill. And then we've interviewed like so many incredible and very, very interesting people. And then of course there's the shows like this one, where it's just good to chat with a good friend that helped me cut my teeth in SEO right out of day one. So, but in fact, before day one, I was like, watching you guys, and that's when I went, oh, that looks fun.
When you were working for the hosting firm, yeah.
So yeah, it'll be sort of like a very bittersweet sort of exit. But as you note, there are still some shows ahead to be had. So yeah, good to let people know that is coming, and that there'll be a show continuing on, and a great one at that. So I look forward to seeing what you guys all come up with as well.
So again, look forward to the shows coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to be trying to get old friends from the past few years to come on to say hi and talk about where the careers are at now, where the careers were, and wish Dave well moving forward. On that, we've gone full clock. You've been listening to Webcology on WMR.FM on the 15th of December, 2022. If you still haven't got your Christmas shopping done, well, Amazon ain't going to do it for you. You have to go out and use Google Business, Google Local, to find out where local stores are in your community, which is actually kind of a cool thing because it's good to support local stores in your community. We're going to be back next week. In the meantime, stay well, rank well, do good by yourself, by your clients, be kind to each other, and be well. We'll talk to you next week.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of WebmasterRadio.fm's management or sponsors. Any rebroadcast or redistribution without authorized consent of WebmasterRadio.fm is prohibited.
Wingstop's doing what they do best, taking flavor to the next level. So when chicken sandwiches only came in spicy and plain, Wingstop said, nah, make it 12 flavors. Lemon pepper chicken sandwich, OG hot, mango habanero. You get the picture? Every famous Wingstop flavor. now on a new Wingstop chicken sandwich. Try all 12 and find your favorite at Wingstop, where flavor gets its wings.
It's a season of giving back. That's why Kia is expanding our partnership with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and making a donation for every eligible new car purchase during the holidays through Kia's Accelerate the Good program. Kia, movement that inspires.
Kia will donate $8 for every new Kia vehicle that is purchased or leased at authorized Kia dealerships and delivered to retail customers between November 11th, 2022 and December 31st, 2022, with a guaranteed minimum donation of $1 million to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. See kia.com/season of giving back for details.